Now, eicosanoids, as we mentioned previously, are derived from polyunsaturated fatty acids such as linoleic acid, which is then converted to a 20-carbon fatty acid known as arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid is a polyunsaturated fatty acid because it contains 4 double bonds. Now, since arachidonic acid has 4 cis double bonds, they are U-shaped. Remember the cis double bonds, how we mentioned it before, that kink? So because you have 4 of those kink-shaped bonds, they are U-shaped, and this has tremendous physiological significance. Now, eicosanoids include prostanoids, leukotrienes, and lipoxins. Prostanoids include prostaglandins, prostacyclins, and thromboxanes. Now, generally when we speak about eicosanoids, the ones you would hear most are leukotrienes, prostaglandins, and thromboxanes. But here we see they are slightly related compounds as well. Now, eicosanoids are produced locally, that is right in the tissue, and they have a very short half-life. So they do what they have to do, and then they're got moving. Now, the first eicosanoid we'll be looking at is prostaglandin. And if we look at this diagram here, we would see there's a double bond, and it has a cyclic chain at the end, a pentagonal chain at the end, and that's the 5-carbon ring that I was just describing. And prostaglandins exist in all mammalian tissues as local hormones. They act by regulating the synthesis of CAMP, which is an intercellular messenger. Since CAMP has a variety of cellular and tissue functions, prostaglandins in turn would, because remember prostaglandins regulate the synthesis of CAMP. It's like saying my teacher taught me a lot of stuff, then I go and teach someone else a lot of stuff who in turn teaches 100%. So just as if my teacher was teaching all of us, because without him the part is broken. So prostaglandins synthesize CAMP. CAMP has a variety of functions. So in other words, prostaglandins will have a variety of functions. The source of prostaglandins is arachidonic acid. That is its immediate precursor. And arachidonic acid is stored in cell membranes as a component of phospholipids. And we will deal with phospholipids in a short while. Now, COX-1 and 2, COX stands for cyclooxygenase. They catalyze prostaglandin production. So that's the basics about prostaglandin, but there are a little more details we're going to know. Some functions of prostaglandins include muscle contraction during childbirth, the sleep-wake cycle, temperature regulation. Prostaglandins cause inflammation and pain, and they are involved in regulating the responsiveness of certain tissues to hormones such as epinephrine and glucagon. Okay, now we mentioned that arachidonic acid was a precursor to prostaglandin, So here we see that phospholipase A2 releases the arachidonic acid from phospholipid. Now, phospholipases are molecules which would cleave fatty acids or sometimes phosphate groups off of molecules. So we see that phospholipase A2 takes a phospholipid and cleaves one of its fatty acids off, and this fatty acid happens to be arachidonic acid. So if the enzyme phospholipase 2 is somehow inhibited, prostaglandin synthesis will also be inhibited. And here we see that cortisol, which is an anti-inflammatory agent, also inhibits phospholipase A2 activity. And remember we were stating that one of the functions of prostaglandins is in inflammatory reactions. So cortisol, which is an anti-inflammatory, that's how it actually works. Now, another class of drugs, non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, that's the abbreviation for it. These include substances such as aspirin, indomethacin, and phenylbutazone. And these drugs inhibit COX-1 and COX-2. And now we said that COX enzymes are very important in catalyzing prostaglandin production. Good. Now a little detail concerning the COX enzymes. When COX-2 activity is blocked, inflammation is reduced. Remember the function of prostaglandins produce inflammation. And unlike COX-1, COX-2 is active only at the site of inflammation and not in the stomach. Here we have a brief diagram showing some of what happens in the synthesis of prostaglandins. You see membrane phospholipids are cleaved by phospholipid A, producing arachidonic acid. And we see that this could go to form both prostaglandins as well as thromboxane. But a different pathway is used to form the leukotrienes, which we would come across just now, where the enzyme involved is like lipoxygenase. But what I'm trying to show you is that arachidonic acid, the conversion from this into prostaglandins, and both prostaglandins and thromboxanes can be inhibited by substances such as aspirin and other drugs. Now, let's take a brief look at thromboxanes. Thromboxanes have a 6-membered ring, so prostaglandins have a 5-membered ring. Thromboxanes have a 6-membered ring, and they contain ether. Now, ether is different from ester. Ether is different from an ester. See ester linkage, where in both cases water molecules are given off an H and a OH, but in an ester linkage, if you notice here, the double bond is still present between the carbon and the oxygen. But in an ether, the hydrocarbon chain and the hydrocarbon chain are connected by a single oxygen. That's an ether. This is an ester, this is an ether. The thromboxane have a 6-membered ring containing ether, and they are produced by thrombocytes and act both in the formation of blood clots and the reduction of blood supply to the clot. Here we see thromboxanes, thrombocytes. I forgot to mention it, but prostaglandins, they got their name because it was first discovered in the prostrate gland, prostaglandins. So you could see the functions and the structure and the way they were discovered are reflected in their names: prostaglandins, thromboxanes, thrombocytes, etc. Now, as I was stating just a while ago, that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as aspirin, ibuprofen, meclofenominate, these all inhibit COX enzymes, which catalyzes an early step in the pathway from arachidonic acid, prostaglandins, and thromboxanes. Once more, the diagram I was referring to, this is the early step we're speaking about, the after right here. Okay. Now, it must be noted that thromboxane and prostacyclins, as a type of prostaglandins, PGI2, are antagonistic in relation to their effects on blood clotting. So where thromboxanes were reducing blood flow into the clot and enabling clot formation, prostacyclins have an opposite effect. Very important that we remember this. Now, the third class of eicosanoids that we'll be dealing with are leukotrienes. And here we see the structure of leukotrienes. If you can see, I don't know if you could see it clearly here, but there are 4 double bonds present in leukotrienes. They are derived through a lipoxygenase pathway. Remember we mentioned that just a while ago. They contain 4 double bonds, and they cause bronchoconstriction and inflammatory reactions. Remember which one of the other molecules were causing inflammatory reactions? Well, here we see that leukotrienes also does something similar. Now, overproduction, remember leukotrienes cause inflammatory reactions, so overproduction may cause asthma attacks, and hence prednisone, which is an anti-asthmatic drug, would inhibit these leukotrienes. Now, leukotrienes may cause potentially fatal allergic reactions such as lung smooth muscle contraction in individuals who are hypersensitive to bee stings and other such allergic factors. So you see, leukotrienes overproduction could be very dangerous, and as such, people who have these kind of attacks would have to use things like prednisone for asthma, etc. Okay, so that's just one thing. I seem to like this table because it's the third time I put it. So take a look at it, and here we see that the lipoxygenase leads to the formation of leukotrienes, and lipoxygenase isn't inhibited by the aspirins and so on that we were speaking about when we spoke about prostaglandins and thromboxanes. Now this table is very important due to time constraints. You could just pause the video and read it, but for now we'll be moving right along. Classification of lipids: we've dealt with fatty acids, we've dealt with ecoisanoids. Now we'll be moving right on to triacylglycerides.